Josh?
Now I can, yes.
Awesome. How are you, man?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Good.
Oh, awesome. Well, thank you very much for taking time to do this interview.
Oh, my pleasure, man. Thanks for having me.
Oh, absolutely. It's great to be able to talk to you, and great to be able to talk to you again. I think it's the first time in 8 years now. I remember I did an interview back with you way back in 2012 when you were playing with Soilwork in Minnesota, so it's great to be able to catch up and great to be able to talk about some death metal here with Cadaver.
Nice. Yeah, man. Absolutely. Yeah, 2012. Living in...
Oh, that's right. That was such a great show, and it's amazing to see everything that you've been going through since 2012 too. I mean, like all the changes in your life, all the bands and that you were able to at least have an album a part of, and now being able to see the recreation of Cadaver here and seeing you behind the drums. It's just incredible to see.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I mean, I keep busy. I love music. I love creating music with people, and so when there's a project that, kind of profiles itself and it's possible for me and I enjoy doing it, then I go for it. And the whole meeting with Anders Auden, it happened pretty organically. I ended up filling in for Satyricon a couple of years after you and I spoke, and that was on the 70,000 Tons of Metal cruise. And Anders plays bass in Satyricon, and so we just kind of naturally connected, and I told him I was a fan of Cadaver from, way back when I was a teenager, and we talked about it, and he said, hey, I have some demos laying around, that I've been working on sporadically here and there. Would you be interested to work on them with me? And I'm like, yeah, man, send them over. So that's kind of how that started.
Oh, it's just so cool to see that, too. I mean, with those legendary releases back in the day, and now being able to get the chance to be able to check out this album over the last 24 hours or so, it's incredible to see the work that you two have done together, and, just having that really great, raw, gritty sound going into this, and then you being able to match that sound so well, too. I mean, I'm so used to hearing you with that crisp, clear production on here, but now hearing just that really great, raw sound, just cymbals, bass, and drum taken out, or bass drum, snare drum for the most part on this album. I mean, I really love what's going on here.
Thank you. Yeah, that was something I really felt, because having been a fan of Cadaver for so many years, and of the raw sound that, has always been a part of what they did. When I talked with Anders, I said, look, I know nowadays we have, the way recordings are now, it's easy to make something sound really nice and, really perfect. And I said, I don't want perfect. I want, personally, the way I listen to Cadaver and the way I enjoy those records is just, like you said, the raw aspect of just the people playing together with whatever, mistakes might happen or slight variations might happen, because to me, that's all part of that death metal style, I mean, there's of course many ways to interpret death metal, but back in the day, people just didn't have big means, there weren't many producers who even knew how to make that music sound, great, so they were just kind of all experimenting, really, and a lot of bands would just rehearse the songs, play together, and then go in the studio and do the same thing, which especially on the first Cadaver album you can really hear. So we went into it with that state of mind, because Anders agreed with me that, he wanted to keep that spirit too, and instead of doing the typical thing where you start with drums and then, next you record the bass and then the guitars, etc., etc. We just went in together and played the songs together. So him on guitar, me on drums, and we would just do takes of the songs until we had a take that we thought, this one has really great energy. We didn't use a click track for most of the songs either. So that's what you're hearing, man.
Yeah, and I was wondering about that too, because it does feel like it has that natural progression in the sound where, obviously with the click track, I mean, you can still make it sound natural with a click track, but on here, I mean, it just feels so natural between you two being able to play it, and if it goes a little bit faster in the part or a little bit slower in the part, it feels like it was meant to be that way in the song.
Yeah, that's exactly the case. So it's something that we intended to do, and like you said, when you use a click track, there's still ways to play to it organically for sure, but it's harder to really get the natural flow of a song. And that's one of the reasons why I suggested to Anders, let's just play together, and let's see how it goes without a click track and if we can make it work. And of course it takes a bit more work because, you both have to do a good take and you both have to feel good about what you did. So it takes a bit more work in the studio and a bit more preparation beforehand, but we had the luxury of working on preparing the album over, the course of a few years, slowly but surely. And so exactly like you said, I think those variations and those nuances really add a lot to the end result, and it's something that sadly gets overlooked nowadays by a lot of bands and productions. And not saying it always needs to be that way because that's not the case, but when it comes to a sound like death metal or even grindcore, personally I like it when you hear a band jamming, to sum it up really briefly. And so that's what we aimed for, and I'm really glad that you're hearing it in the result.
Oh, totally. And I hear that throughout the entire album, too. And I just really appreciate it when a band is able to maintain that old school death metal mentality, like you were talking about, being able to go in there and just jam the songs out and make them sound the way that they should sound. I mean, obviously sometimes there is the occasional parts that do need a click track or something that needs to be fixed up or whatever the case, but everything on here is so natural, I wouldn't even be able to guess the parts that did have some click track behind it.
Good. Well, that was the goal, and yeah, that's what I like about the death metal and just the extreme metal in general from the 80s, and I think there was a vibe there that was just really magical. And so that's kind of what I wanted to tap into. And of course, things evolve over time. I'm not, as much as I love that era, I also love things now. And I think there's actually a really good resurgence of this kind of approach nowadays. There are a lot of underground bands and even some bigger bands that go for the same kind of vibe because there's something to be said for what happens organically. And unfortunately, as soon as you put a click track on and you start recording instruments separately and you start trying to make everything really perfect as it may sound, you lose a little bit of that, the little details that make each person sound like themselves, you know what I mean? Like if you take my drums or anybody's drums and you log them into the grid, you're going to lose a lot of what makes me sound like me, or let's say John Bonham sound like John Bonham or whatever, so name any drummer. We all have, and the same goes for all musicians, we all have our own little things we do when we play, and we have our own style. And so I really, when it's a project like this, like Cadaver, I really want to take that opportunity to be able to express myself in that way. And I'm really happy that Anders saw it the same way and was willing to spend the time and do the work with me. And, it was, like I said, it was a work-intensive process, especially for him, because he had to record all the guitars, the bass, the vocals, he does most of the stuff. I just have to play drums and I was done. But it's, in the end, like, I think the result speaks for itself.
In speaking of that too, I mean, when you were in the studio and you were able to listen back, like when did it start to feel right for you on the drums? Like when you had the setup going and the production going, like when you were able to listen back, when did it start feeling right to you with the approach that you were going for?
I mean, we started with one of the slower songs because I kind of wanted to ease into it. And I think once we had one of those tracks, we did some takes and we listened back and we had one of those tracks down and we're like, okay, this seems to be working. Let's try a little bit more of an intricate, faster song. And we did one of those. That's kind of how I recall it. And then it just felt right. At that point we were on a roll and we said, let's try this. Let's go for it and see how it turns out. And truth be told, you never really know how things are going to be until they're finished, but we just had a good feeling about it, and Anders obviously being an underground pioneer, having done demos with Cadaver since the late 80s, he has a good feel for how things should sound. So I also trusted his judgment with that as well. And then, he was very happy with what I was doing, and so was our producer, Edder Dolphinbach. So, the three of us were in the room just feeling it. And when that happens, you can usually just trust that and go with it.
Oh, that's so great to hear that. So, and speaking of that, like, I mean, obviously with so many bands and projects and doing drum appearances of what you do, I mean, there's so many different styles that you can incorporate. Like, when it came to Cadaver, like, what kind of setup did you want to go for as far as your drum setup?
I went for sort of a straightforward drum setup. I didn't want to have, like, the biggest kit that I could have, so I kept it pretty simple. I think I used 3 toms, so 2 racks, 1 floor. I think I only used 2 crashes. Sometimes I have up to 4 crashes, like especially with Megadeth, I'll have more crashes because, you know, there's just more use for them. But with Cadaver, I wanted to keep it fairly stripped down. You know, I did have a couple of splashes. I do have hats on each side because that's kind of something I'm used to and that I like working with, you know, creating little accents with slightly different hi-hat sounds and things like that. Or when I'm already with my right hand on the right cymbal, it's easier to throw in a few hi-hat hits like that when it's appropriate. But yeah, in general, stripped down, kind of like the musical approach too. You know, we didn't want to overcomplicate the music in general, and I think you can hear that in the record. It's when you have a good riff, and then, you know, you build that into a good song structure and it just flows. I think sometimes there's a tendency to add things here and there, but sometimes, like, I'll do that too, you know, when I write my own stuff, like for Ben C, my grindcore band, I'll start adding stuff, and then a few days later I'll listen back and I'll be like, screw all those extra tracks. It doesn't need it, you know, it sounds good the way it is. So that was kind of the approach both on the drums and musically.
Yeah, and, you know, it's great to see that you can really adapt to both situations. I mean, when you're either able to go something primal like this and with Cadaver and, you know, just like learning the songs, trying to do it on your own and just like know what's going to feel right for the song, or doing the different kind of approaches where you just record segments of the songs and put them together. I mean, the fact that you've been able to adapt to all those situations in so many different styles, I mean, that's why it's so cool to see like everything that you're able to do right now and been doing, especially since we last talked in 2012, because, you know, just like so many variations of metal that you've been able to accomplish. And even on this latest Cadaver album alone, I mean, being able to see the different kinds of blasts that you're throwing in there as well too, rather than just doing the same blast beat over and over. I mean, it's those little details that really shine out to me.
Well, thank you. I always try to bring some different things and different ideas. You know, I use every project that I'm blessed to be a part of to try and kind of explore. And, you know, because for me, that keeps things fun and interesting, and hopefully for people who hear it afterwards as well. So that's why it's good to hear you say that, because I do put thought in those things, because I don't want to just repeat what I do over and over. You know, that would just become very boring and predictable, even if the ideas are good. So I'm always pushing myself to try different things, and it's really about kind of getting under the skin of the song and the band, because as you mentioned, you know, different projects require different approaches, and I've been fortunate to do a lot of that over the course of my life, to work with a lot of different people in a lot of different settings, and every time you do that, you learn new things. So I try to take that knowledge and apply that to whatever situation I'm in. But at the same time, it's also important not to overthink things, right? Especially with a band like Cadaver, that's very much about primal, in the moment kind of vibes. So a lot of that too was like, let's just do a take. And some parts that I was going to play were, you know, roughly sketched out, but not defined specifically. And so then you have to be open to sometimes be like, hey, maybe I should try something different here, or maybe Anders or Edder would tell me, how about you try a beat like that? You know, those moments probably happened. I don't recall specifically, but I'm always open to suggestions and to trying something different. And I think that's part of, you know, for me, that's one of the keys of keeping things fresh and interesting.
Oh, absolutely. And, you know, again, with how in demand that you are with everything that you have been able to accomplish in your career so far, and so many different musicians and so many different kinds of producers being able to come up with ideas, and so many ideas that you want to implicate from different things that you've been a part of. I mean, it's just incredible to see all that work. And, you know, it's just, in speaking of the people that you've been able to work with, I mean, the fact that on this album alone that you got some guest appearances with Jeff Becerra and Cam Lee on this album. I mean, when you're talking about like legendary death metal, I mean, it's awesome to see like the legends from Death and Possessed on this album.
Yeah, for sure. And actually, that was something very important to us, and especially to Anders, because both Cam and Jeff, and also Jeff Walker, I must add, who has some guest appearance on the EP that came out prior to the album. Those three guys were extremely important to Anders, growing up, and to me as well. I mean, I'm a little bit younger, but I still, obviously all of those bands were extremely important to me as well, having grown up with extreme metal. So for us to be able to have those guys, and a lot of that was kind of happenstance to have them. For example, we went to see Carcass while Anders was here to record the album. He came here to LA, and Carcass happened to play a show, so we went to see them, and that was our chance to get Jeff to do some vocals. And the same thing with Jeff Becerra. My wife Hannah, who's a professional photographer, was doing band pictures for Possessed also during that time when Anders happened to be here. So it kind of all came together, The thing with Cam was predated all that. That's something that Anders set up because he'd been in touch with Cam for many years. So at one point he just sent him a song, and that actually came together. But yeah, it's an honor, man. It's an honor to have those people, and I think to us it's kind of a full circle thing where we connected to what we came from and people that really were important for us, in that world to even inspire us in the first place to make music ourselves. So it's really cool. It's really cool, and we're all super enthusiastic to participate. And I think it's a great thing for the record.
Oh, absolutely. And of course, mentioning Jeff Walker too of Carcass. I mean, between Possessed, Death, and Carcass, I mean that is such a great extremes when it comes to extreme death metal, and then being able to have Cadaver bring them all in between the EP and the album. And I remember a little while back that I was talking to Anders about the EP as well too, and it was great to see that Jeff Walker was a part of that. And it got me like wondering, like, how did you guys decide what was going to be on the EP and what was going to be on the full album?
If I recall correctly, what happened is that the EP was supposed to be after the album. But then, of course, the pandemic happened and everything got switched around, and, things just kind of had to be reviewed. Like, how are we going to do this? The band was supposed to go on tour. There were a bunch of things planned, just like pretty much for every band. And so we had to kind of rethink our strategy. So in talking with Nuclear Blast, we decided, you know what, let's take this EP. These songs are actually pretty cool, and let's release that first, because in our mind, and especially in Anders' mind, I think he kind of decided those were maybe the least important songs of the 13 we recorded. And so, it's one of those things where you feel like, hey, these 10 fit really well together, and these 3 are cool too, but, they don't really need to be on there to make the album complete, because you got to look at the whole. We're people that grew up in an era where albums were everything. I know that there's always been singles, and that there's always been people who prefer to just listen to songs or to mixes, mixtapes or whatever. We've all done that too. But an album should express a specific idea, and it should have a flow that keeps you excited. And, I always describe it as a roller coaster ride, because that's how I like my records. I like there to be, ups and downs and just moments that stand out, and then, maybe moments of calm that contrast with the more intense moments. All that stuff, right? So that's kind of how it was decided that, hey, these 10 songs fit really well together. Let's put these 3 on the side, and maybe we can put them out separately. And then with the pandemic, it got switched, and the EP came out first.
And it's great to see that with that. I mean, both the EP and the LP are still coming out this year, despite everything that's been going on in 2020. And I think it was actually a really good blessing to be able to have the EP come out first, because it got new people to be reintroduced to the band or checking it out for the first time, or people knowing of your work being able to check out Cadaver for the first time, and then now getting a taste of that, knowing that the full LP is going to be coming out next month, and getting that full taste of it. And I totally agree with you as well too. I'm very much an album guy. I really love the ebb and flow of an album when it's done right, when you got the right track listing, when you got the highs and lows that really make you want to listen from start to finish. And coming in here with 10 songs, a little over a half hour of music combined, I think that just really made for such a solid LP, and those other songs do stand alone together to be able to check out as well.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I'm so all about, track list and track order, and I'm not gonna lie, sometimes there's albums where I make my own track order. I don't know if you ever do that, but I like it. Sometimes I'm like, man, this would be so much better if it was this order, and I'll experiment with it a little bit, and then I'll save it like that and be like, this is how it should have been done, And some bands I've even said that about their records in retrospect, like Napalm Death being one of my favorite bands. They said not too long ago that some of their albums, it would have been better if there was this song first and then that song. People would have reacted to it differently. And I think it's true. I think those things do have a huge effect on how, the whole is perceived. Like, if you start off with one song or the other, it could really change everything. So anyways, but that stuff is really important to us. And I agree that in the end, it ended up being a blessing for the EP to come out first, to kind of give people a taster of, hey, Cadaver's been gone for a while, we're back. Like you said, bring some new people on board, hopefully, and then, get them all amped up for the record. So, yeah, sometimes things happen not as you planned them to and turn out to be great anyway.
Oh, absolutely. And, thinking about that again as well with everything that's been going on in 2020, I mean, the fact that you've been keeping so busy with everything that's going on, I mean, being able to promote Cadaver, I didn't get the chance to listen to it yet, but I just got it through email today, the new release from Brave the Cold. I mean, you working with Mitch Harris, and that's so cool to see that. And, obviously, the biggest of it all when it comes to, the size of it all, I mean, you being able to work with Megadeth and being able to write new songs for the new album, and just seeing what you can do, when it comes to extreme metal and death metal and thrash metal. I mean, you being able to expand all of those horizons continuously, and in 2020, despite there being a lack of shows from March onwards, I mean, I'm glad to see that you're able to keep up all this work.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I mean, I'm very fortunate in that I have been in this situation where I've been able to work from home, and also just in general that I've been able to spend a lot of my life with my passion, and having listened to music since I was really young, just taking all that, experience and knowledge, I guess you should call it, and just kind of express that in my own way, and then being really fortunate too that there are so many different people who are excited to work with me, because I never take that as a given either. Like every project that happens, I'm like, wow, this is so cool. I mean, a lot of these people are people that I grew up idolizing, like whether it's Dave Mustaine or whether it's Mitch Harris or whether it's Anders. Those are all people that have been really important in my life, to kind of keep me motivated to do what I do and inspire me. So it's really wonderful, and I think a lot of that stuff, of course, was, whether it's Cadaver or even Brave the Cold, a lot of that stuff was done prior to the pandemic. I mean, a lot of those things were recorded 2 years ago. But I have been able to, continue working with Megadeth. We've recorded, of course, as you know, bass and drums already, and guitars are in really good progress right now. So, I mean, we were supposed to tour, pretty much half of the year or more this year. So it's been a strange year for everybody, and for us included, but the only thing we can do is adapt, move forward, and find new ways of, staying afloat, because that's really what it comes down to. That's a big chunk of income that goes away when half of your year's worth of work just kind of, gets, postponed or possibly canceled for some of it. So, I've had to stay busy, to be honest with you, and luckily I'm able to do it. I'm very, very happy that I am.
Oh yeah, I mean, when you have that ability to be able to work from home, and when you do have that passion to be able to play behind the drums and being able to adapt and work with so many different types of music and musicians, and being able to show off your skills in so many different ways. I mean, yeah, like I mentioned before, it's so great to be able to see that you were able to do that in 2020. And, the fact that you did have some work done prior to 2020, obviously looking forward to touring and everything and things having to change and you being able to adapt and working from home. I mean, it's got me excited to see what else you're going to be having down the pipeline when it comes to 2021 as well, too. I mean, obviously the new Megadeth, I can't wait to see what you're doing behind the drums on there and how those songs are coming together and what it's going to sound like. But I also am very curious to see what else you've been working on this year and what to look forward to in 2021 with you behind the drums on it.
Yeah, well, there's going to be some more stuff for sure. Some stuff I don't know if I can talk about yet, but I can tell you that I've been writing a lot of music myself too. So Ben C, which is my band, has a lot in the pipeline. I've been releasing some songs online under the Instagrind banner. But that's kind of something I've been doing just because a lot of the other stuff has been in the pipeline for a little bit and has been slowed down by the pandemic, etc. So since I'm constantly creating, I decided, well, I can use this time to jam with some people I really like. I've had Athenor from Midnight, Thomas from At the Gates, Petri from Feastum, Richard Johnson from Drugs of Fate. Those are a few of the guests that I've had. Jesper from Nasum. And there's more to come. But beside the Instagram series, there's also a full-length album that's being completed currently. There's a bunch of extra songs as well. So yeah, man, I mean, music is my life. What can I say? I'm always staying busy and I'm always finding ways to express myself. And I think, you've mentioned a few times that it's a big diversity of stuff. And, I hope it's not too confusing to people, but the truth is, I grew up with a lot of different kinds of music. Like in my household, there was classical music, there was rock and roll, there was, pop music, there was hard rock, there was hip hop. There were all those things that, progressively over the years I became a big fan of and that really spoke to me and influenced me. And so even though I'm mostly a metal drummer, of course, because that's obviously my path and that's what I've been doing, I'm just somebody who enjoys music at large, in general. And so for me, each one of those projects makes sense. It's not just something I do to just like, hey, here's another album I can play on, These are all things that I connect to in a certain way and that have a meaning to me. And I try to tap into that meaning and to that connection to inform what I'm actually performing on those albums. And so it goes way further than just like, let's say Mitch Harris is like, hey, here's a bunch of songs, record drums on them. No, it's like, it's way deeper than that. And to me, all those things are very meaningful and important. And I feel extremely fortunate to be able to do this with my life, and that people like Mitch and Anders and Dave and the rest of Megadeth and all those people are actually, willing to work with me.
Oh, absolutely. And, it's great to be able to see that background, that you are able to use that to adapt to so many different kinds of situations. And I always had a feeling that was there too. I mean, when I picked up my very first Soilwork album, which was Stabbing the Drama, and, when I heard what you were doing on the drums there, I mean, whether you're doing blasts or you were just like playing very solid grooves behind it, I could tell that you weren't just a traditional death metal drummer or a melodic death metal drummer or anything like that. You were a drummer and you knew what to play for every song. And then, obviously looking, at least from my perspective, seeing what you've done since Stabbing the Drama and being able to see everyone that you've worked with, all the different styles that you've done, and obviously just becoming a better and better drummer and musician over the years from being able to work with so many people, learning so many new ideas and continuing that progression. I mean, it's not hard to understand why you're one of my favorite drummers of all time, and I love so much of the work that you do and everything that you've been able to accomplish here in 2020. And yeah, bringing things back here when it comes to Cadaver and the new album Edder and Bile coming out in November. I mean, it's just awesome to see everything you've been able to do. And outside of me fanboying just now, I just gotta say thank you so much again for being able to take the time to be able to talk to me. I mean, I could probably go for a half hour or even longer on all the work that you got going on right now and talking about your drumming and in the past. And it was great to be able to take this short amount of time to be able to talk to you about what's going on here with Cadaver and other stuff to look forward to in the future.
Thanks for having me, Josh. It's really been a pleasure talking with you, and I'm sure we'll talk again soon.